The desperate call, the energy shields. Around Haven Colony music flickered. Like a dying heartbeat, Commander. Jack-Star stood at the observation window of the command center, watching the K-line warships circle his station like predators waiting for their prey to collapse. His forearms were crossed tightly against his chest, a gesture of deep worry among his people. The Velcurans behind him, the command center buzzed with frantic activity as his crew worked desperately to keep the shields operational for just one more hour. Then one more after that. Haven Colony was supposed to be a place of peace, built at the edge of Coalition space. It served as a research station where scientists from 20 different species worked together to study ancient civilizations and share knowledge. There were no weapons on the station beyond basic security equipment. There were no soldiers beyond a small peacekeeping force. The 3,000 souls aboard Haven Colony were scholars, engineers, families and children. They were dreamers who believed the galaxy had moved beyond war. The K-line had proven them wrong. Jack-Star had never seen a K-line warrior before 3 weeks ago. Now he wished he never had. They were massive creatures standing nearly 3 m tall, with thick armored hides that could deflect most energy weapons. Their faces were angular and cruel, with rows of sharp teeth and eyes that glowed like hot coals. But it was not their appearance that made them so terrifying. It was their reputation. The Kalan Empire had been expanding aggressively for the past decade, swallowing smaller territories and enslaving peaceful species. The Galactic Coalition had tried diplomacy, sanctions, and warnings. Nothing worked. The K-line believed that strength was the only currency that mattered in the universe. They respected power and despised weakness. Haven Colony, with its scholars and families and lack of defenses, represented everything they despised. Lieutenant Sarna approached Jack-Star cautiously. She was a young Velcuran with bright green skin and nervous energy that made her movements quick and jerky. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Commander, the shield generators are down to 18% capacity. Engineering says we have maybe 30 hours before complete failure. 40 if we shut down life support. To the outer sections, Jack-Star closed his eyes. 30 hours. The Coalition fleet would not arrive for 18 days. Mathematics of their survival were simple and brutal. They had no chance. Have the K-line responded to our latest communication? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Yes, sir. The same message as before. Surrender the station and all personnel will be processed as prisoners. Resist and everyone dies. Sarna paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. Commander, you know what they mean by processed. We have all heard the stories from the occupied territories. Jack-Star knew the K-line did not take prisoners in the traditional sense. They took slaves, soldiers for their armies, subjects for their experiments. The survivors from worlds the K-line had conquered spoke of horrors that made death seem like mercy. Behind them, the command center doors opened and Dr. T.H.N.E. Wexler shuffled in. He was old, even by Velcron standards. His skin faded to a pale gray, and his movements slow and deliberate. Wexler was the station's head of historical research, a scholar who had spent 60 years studying ancient galactic civilizations. He rarely left his laboratory in the lower decks, and his presence in the command center was unusual. Commander Jack-R. Wexler said, his voice raspy with age. I need to speak with you privately. It concerns our situation. Jexar wanted to dismiss him. He had 1,000 crisis situations demanding his attention, but something in the old scholar's eyes made him pause. There was a strange intensity there, a spark of something that might have been hope or might have been madness. My office, Jexar said. 5 minutes they walked together through the corridors of the station. Everywhere Jexar looked, he saw fear. Families huddled together in common areas. Scientists sat at their workstation, staring at blank screens, unable to focus. Security personnel stood at their posts with weapons they knew would be useless against K-line warriors. The air itself felt heavy with desperation. In his office, Jexar sealed the door and activated the privacy field. Dr. Wexler, I hope you have not come to tell me about some ancient prophecy or historical parallel. I need solutions, not stories. Wexler's compound eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. What I have is both a story and a solution, but it comes at a price that may be too high for your conscience to bear. Speak plainly, doctor. We do not have time for riddles. The old Velcro reached into his worn satchel and pulled out a data tablet. The device was ancient, using technology from decades ago. He placed it on Jexar's desk with trembling hands. Before you look at this, you must understand something about galactic history. There are truths that the Coalition does not teach, events that have been buried, sanitized, or forgotten because they were too disturbing for civilized minds to process. Jexar felt a chill run through his body. What kind of events? 32 years ago, there was a series of conflicts on the frontier worlds. The Coalition calls them the border disputes in official records, but those who lived through them call them by another name, the Silent Wars. Wexler's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They were called silent because the Coalition tried very hard to keep the truth from spreading. They were called wars because that is what they were, though the galaxy refused to admit it. I have heard rumors, Jexar admitted, border colonies attacked by raiders, Coalition security forces responding with unusual force. But the records are sealed. The records are sealed because of what happened when humanity got involved. Wexler tapped the tablet and a holographic image appeared above the desk. It showed a young human woman in military armor. She had dark skin, short black hair, and eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. This is Captain Maya Rodriguez. She was 28 years old when this image was taken. She was one of 300 human soldiers deployed to defend the frontier colonies during the Silent Wars. Jexar studied the image carefully. The human looked small compared to most species in the galaxy. Humans were relatively new members of the Coalition. Having joined only 40 years ago, they were known as clever engineers and skilled diplomats, but not as warriors. Most species considered them physically weak and emotionally fragile. What does an old military photograph have to do with our current crisis? Jexar asked. Wexler's expression grew darker. The raiders during the Silent Wars were not random pirates. They were K-line advanced forces, the same empire that surrounds us now. They were testing the Coalition's resolve, probing for weaknesses. When they attacked the colony on Crimson Ridge, they sent their elite warriors, 400 of the finest soldiers the K-line Empire could produce, and Captain Maya Rodriguez was stationed there as part of a small peacekeeping force. When the attack came, she was separated from her unit. She was alone, wounded and trapped in a settlement with 60 civilians who could not be evacuated. Wexler paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. K-Line warriors entered that settlement, expecting easy prey. 18 hours later, only 47 of those warriors walked out alive. The 60 civilians survived. Captain Rodriguez survived, though barely. Jexar stared at the old scholar. One human held off 400 K-Line warriors. That is impossible. It should have been impossible, but humanity has a secret that most of the galaxy does not understand. For millions of years they evolved on a death world, a planet where almost everything was trying to kill them. They became persistent hunters, creatures that would chase their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They developed a capacity for violence that most civilized species had bred out of themselves ago. Wexler's hand shook as he continued, when a human is pushed to their absolute limit, when they believe they have nothing left to lose, something ancient awakens inside them, something primal and terrifying. This sounds like mythology, Doctor. I wish it were. Wexler pulled up another file. After the incident at Crimson Ridge, the Coalition conducted an extensive investigation. They found recordings from the K-Line warriors' helmet cameras. What they saw disturbed them so deeply that they classified everything and made humanity sign a treaty, the Fortress Accord. It banned human warriors from active combat deployment. Humanity agreed because they were horrified by what they had become. Jexar felt his heart's beating faster. You are suggesting we contact this Captain Rodriguez, ask her to help us. She is no longer a captain. She resigned from the military 20 years ago and lives alone on Mars in the Sol system. The Coalition pays her a pension in exchange for her promise to never fight again. But yes, Commander, I am suggesting exactly that. Wexler met his eyes. The K-Line warriors who survived Crimson Ridge spread stories throughout their empire. They created a new word in their language. Sarka. It means the hunter that cannot be stopped, the nightmare that walks on two legs. One retired soldier against an entire fleet. How could that possibly change anything? Because the K-Line, remember, Commander, their culture values strength above all else, but they also understand fear. They have never faced a species like humanity in true combat. They have never experienced what happens when humans stop being civilized. Wexler pushed the tablet closer. Send the message. Tell her about the 3,000 civilians. Tell her about the children. And most importantly, tell her that the K-Line are here. Jexar picked up the tablet with shaking hands. He looked at the image of Maya Rodriguez again, at those eyes that seemed to hold shadows no one should carry. He thought about the families huddled in fear throughout his station. He thought about the 30 hours they had left before the shields failed. He thought about what the K-Line would do to everyone aboard. If I do this, if I break the Fortress Accord and call a forbidden warrior back to combat, the Coalition will never forgive me. If you do not do this, Wexler said quietly, there will be no one left to forgive. The command center doors opened again, and Sarna rushed in, her face pale with fear. Commander, the K-Line fleet is powering up their weapons. They are preparing for a final assault. Jexar made his decision. He activated his personal communicator and sent Priority transmission to Mars. The message was simple and desperate. Captain Maya Rodriguez, Haven Colony. Under siege, 3,000 civilians, 18 days. Until coalition rescue, 30 hours until. Shield failure, enemy force, K-line. Empire fleet, we need the hunter that cannot be stopped, please help us, he sent the message into the void and prayed that somewhere in the darkness, the nightmare would hear their call and answer. On Mars in a small habitat, carved into the red rock, Maya Rodriguez sat in silence. She was 54 years old. Now her hair streaked with gray and her body marked with scars that ached in the cold. She had not worn military armor. 20 years, she had not held a weapon. Combat since Crimson Ridge. She had built a quiet life away from the war, away from the killing, away from the thing she became when the darkness took hold. The communicator on her wall began to flash with an emergency signal. She stared at it for a long moment, her jaw clenched tight. She could ignore it. She could let someone else handle this crisis. She had given enough. She had sacrificed enough. But then she thought about the children on Haven Colony, about families holding each other in fear, about scholars who had never hurt anyone, facing monsters they could not comprehend. Maya stood slowly and walked to her storage locker. Inside was her old combat armor, cleaned and maintained, despite her vow never to wear it again. Next to it was her rifle, custom modified beyond any standard military specifications, and beneath them was the knife she had carried through hell itself, its blade still dark from heat. Scoring, she opened the communicator and read the message. K-line. The word hit her like a physical blow, bringing back memories she had spent 2 decades trying to bury. She closed her eyes and felt the old rage stirring in her chest. That primal thing that civilized people were never supposed to feel. 30 hours. She whispered to herself, I can make it. In 28, Maya began putting on her armor, each piece clicking into place with familiar precision. The woman who had spent 20 years trying to be normal, trying to be gentle, trying to forget what she was capable of began to fade away. In her place emerged something the galaxy had hoped never to see again. The hunter was waking up, and the K-line Empire was about to remember why humanity had been forbidden from war. The nightmare awakens. Maya Rodriguez's ship cut through the darkness of space like a blade through silk. The vessel was small, barely larger than a standard transport shuttle, but it had been heavily modified over the years. Reinforced hull plating, military grade engines, and stealth systems that should not have existed on a civilian craft. Maya had told herself she kept the ship maintained out of habit, but deep down she had always known the truth. She had been waiting for this call. The journey from Mars to Haven Colony took 26 hours of hard burn. Mia spent most of that time in the cockpit, her hands steady on the controls, her mind focused on the task ahead. She did not sleep. Sleep would bring dreams, and dreams would bring memories of Crimson Ridge. She could not afford to remember, not yet. Not until the work was done. Through the view screen she could see the K-line fleet long before her ship's sensors registered her approach. 43 warships arranged in a tactical formation around Haven Colony. Each vessel was massive, bristling with weapons and armored plating. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Ma's communication console lit up with an incoming transmission. She ignored it. The K-line would try to warn her off, threaten her, demand her surrender. She had heard it all before. Words meant nothing to warriors, only action mattered. Her ship's AI spoke in a calm, synthetic voice. Captain Rodriguez, we are approaching weapons range of the K-line fleet. My tactical analysis suggests our chances of survival are less than 0.3%. Your tactical analysis is based on conventional combat doctrine, Maya replied quietly. Log this as training. Exercise Protocol 7, full autonomy granted. The AI was silent for a moment, processing the command. Protocol 7 was a relic from the Silent Wars, a combat mode that removed all safety restrictions and ethical subroutines. It turned the ship's AI from a helpful assistant into a ruthless tactical computer designed for one purpose: killing efficiently. Protocol 7 acknowledged, the AI said, and something in its voice had changed. It sounded colder now, more focused. Scanning enemy fleet for vulnerabilities, accessing classified K-line military databases, beginning psychological warfare protocols. Maya leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, letting the old instincts take over. She remembered the first rule they had taught her during her training in the Silent Wars. Human advantage was not strength or speed or technology. It was the ability to think like prey and hunt like a predator simultaneously. Humans understood fear because they had spent millions of years being afraid, and that understanding made them the most terrifying hunters in the galaxy. The K-line fleet finally noticed her approach. 3 destroyer-class ships broke formation and moved to intercept. Their weapon systems powered up, energy signatures blazing across her sensors. Like angry red stars, the lead K-line ship opened a communication channel. Massive warrior filled the view screen, his armored hide scarred from countless battles, his eyes burning with aggressive confidence. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that shook the air itself. Unknown human vessel, you are entering a restricted military zone. Reverse course immediately or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. Maya opened her eyes and looked at the K-line warrior. She did not respond with words. Instead, she reached forward and activated a specific transmission code, one that had been classified for 32 years, the code that identified her as a veteran of the Silent Wars. On the K-line ship, alarms began screaming. The warrior's eyes widened, and for the first time in his military career, he felt something cold crawl up his spine. His tactical officer was shouting, pulling up old records, ancient warnings from warriors who had fought on the frontier decades ago. Commander, that identification code matches records from the Battle of Crimson Ridge. The human's name is Maya Rodriguez. She is the Sarkef, the hunter that cannot be stopped. The K-line commander stared at the screen, his confident expression crumbling. He had heard the stories as a young warrior, tales told by traumatized veterans who had survived encounters with human combatants. He had always dismissed them as exaggerations, the frightened delusions of soldiers who had lost their courage. But now, looking at the small human ship approaching his massive fleet, he felt something he had never experienced in battle: fear. All ships open fire, destroy that vessel now, he roared, and his voice cracked with an emotion no K-line warrior should ever feel. The 3 destroyer ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams lanced through space, enough firepower to vaporize a small moon, but Maya's ship was already moving, dancing between the attacks with impossible precision. She was not dodging randomly, she was leading them, drawing their fire towards specific points in space. Her AI spoke with cold efficiency, enemy firing patterns analyzed, predictive algorithms engaged. They are using standard K-line assault formations from their military doctrine section 4.7. They always do. Mia whispered, warriors who rely on strength never learn to adapt. She triggered her ship's weapon systems, but she did not fire at the K-line vessels. Instead, she targeted pieces of debris floating in the space around Haven Colony, remnants of destroyed supply ships and shattered hull plating. Her precise shots sent the debris spinning in calculated trajectories, creating a chaotic field of high-velocity shrapnel. Between her ship and the destroyers, the Caffin vessels continued their assault, their massive energy weapons tearing through space. But now their shots were hitting the debris field, creating massive explosions that filled the void with blinding light and electromagnetic interference. Their sensors went dark, their targeting systems confused by the chaos. Maya's ship slipped through the confusion like a ghost. She was inside their formation now, close enough that the large destroyer weapons could not track her movements without risking hitting each other. She activated her ship's close-range plasma cutters, tools designed for salvage work but modified for combat. They were not powerful enough to destroy a K-line warship, but they did not need to be. She targeted the sensor arrays, the communication relays, the external weapon control systems, anywhere that was vulnerable, anywhere that would blind them and isolate them. Her ship moved with surgical precision, cutting away the destroyer's ability to fight as a coordinated unit. On the lead K-line destroyer, the commander watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos. His ships were firing blindly, his communications were jammed with interference, and the small human vessel was everywhere and nowhere, striking and vanishing before they could respond. This is impossible, he shouted. One ship cannot do this, one human cannot. His words were cut off as Maya's ship appeared directly in front of his bridge view screen. For a brief moment he could see her through the transparent cockpit of her vessel. She was sitting calmly in her pilot chair, her hands steady on the controls, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made his blood freeze. Then she was gone, and his ship's main power core suffered a catastrophic failure from a plasma cutter strike he had not even seen coming. The destroyer began to drift, powerless and blind, no longer a threat. Maya opened a communication channel, broadcasting to the entire K-line fleet on all frequencies. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. My name is Maya Rodriguez. 32 years ago I fought 400 of your warriors on Crimson Ridge. 47 survived. They survived because I let them go. I let them go so they could tell you what happens when you threaten human civilians, so you would know what we become when you push us too far. She paused, and in that silence, every K-line warrior in the fleet felt the temperature drop. You did not listen. You came here thinking scholars and families would be easy prey. You forgot the lesson I taught your people, so I am here to teach it again. Maya's ship accelerated toward the main K-line battle cruiser, the flagship of the Fleet, it was 10 times her size, armed with enough weapons to level a city, protected by shields that could withstand a sustained bombardment. It should have been invincible. I am not here to negotiate, Maya continued, her voice never rising above that quiet, deadly calm. I am not here to ask you to leave. I am here to remind you why the galaxy made us promise never to fight. Again, she deactivated her ship's stealth systems, letting every sensor in the Kaline fleet see her clearly. One small vessel against an armada. It should have been suicide. You have 10 minutes to begin your retreat. Every minute you remain, I will destroy one of your ships, not disable, not damage. Destroy completely, permanently, and when I am done with your ships, I will come for your warriors one by one, in the corridors of your vessels, where your numbers mean nothing, in the darkness where I was born to hunt. The Kaline fleet commander sat on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by his officers. They were all staring at their tactical displays, at the single human ship that had just crippled 3 destroyers in under 5 minutes. The commander had spent 40 years in military service. He had conquered 15 worlds. He had never retreated from any battle, but he had also heard the recordings from Crimson Ridge. He had listened to the terrified reports from the warriors who survived. He had seen the psychological profiles showing that 70% of those survivors were still receiving treatment for trauma 3 decades later. His tactical officer spoke in a voice that trembled. Commander, our battle doctrine recommends immediate overwhelming force. We should coordinate a fleet-wide assault and eliminate this threat before. What? The commander interrupted, his voice hollow. Before she does to 43 ships what she did to 3, before she does to all of us what she did to 400 warriors on Crimson Ridge. He looked around at his officers, at the fear in their eyes, and realized something terrible. The Kaline Empire had built its power on a simple principle. They were the strongest, the most ruthless, the most willing to use violence, but they had never faced a species that understood violence better than they did. Humans had not evolved as apex predators, they had evolved as prey, animals who learned to fight back, and that made all the difference. Signal the fleet, the commander said quietly. Begin withdrawal procedures. His officers stared at him in shock. Commander, we cannot retreat. The Empire will see this as weakness. Our honor demands that we survive to fight battles we can win. The commander roared, his fear transforming into rage. That human destroyed 3 of our ships without firing a single shot at their hulls. She used our own tactics against us. She turned our strength into a liability. Do you understand what that means? He pointed at the tactical display where Maya's ship circled like a patient predator. She is not fighting to win, she is fighting to teach us fear. And I will not sacrifice this entire fleet to prove a lesson I already learned. The Kaline fleet began to move, their massive ships slowly turning away from Haven Colony. It was not a panicked retreat, but it was a retreat nonetheless. The first time in recorded history that a Kaline military force had withdrawn without engaging in direct combat on Haven Colony. Commander Jaxar watched through the observation window, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. In shock, around him the command center had fallen completely silent. Every sensor operator, every tactical officer, every crew member was staring at their Displays in disbelief, Lieutenant Sarna. Found her voice first, commander of the Kaline fleet is retreating, all 43 ships they are leaving the system, Doctor. Wexler stood beside Jexar, tears running down his weathered face. I told you the stories were true. I told you what humans become. Jexar could not speak. He simply watched as the Kaline warships, those massive instruments of conquest and destruction, fled from a single human in a modified transport shuttle. Maya's ship docked with Haven Colony an hour later. When she emerged from the airlock, a crowd had gathered to see her. They expected a giant, a monster, something that matched the terror she had inflicted on the Kaline fleet. Instead, they saw a woman of average height with gray street hair and tired eyes. She moved with a slight limp from old injuries, and her hands shook just a little as she removed her helmet. Jexar approached her carefully, as if she might shatter if he moved too quickly. Captain Rodriguez, I do not have words to express our gratitude. You saved 3,000 lives today. Maya looked at him with those shadowed eyes, and Jexar understood why the Kaline had fled. It was not her size or her strength or even her skills as a pilot. It was something deeper, something ancient and terrible that lurked behind her gaze. I did not do this for gratitude, Commander, Mia said quietly. I did this because the Kaline needed to remember. The galaxy needs to remember. Humans are not warriors by choice. We are warriors by necessity, and the most dangerous thing in the universe is a peaceful species that remembers how to fight. She turned to leave, to return to her ship and the quiet life she had left behind, but Jexar called out to her, Captain, what you did out there, how you moved, how you anticipated their every action, how is that possible? Maya paused at the airlock door. She did not turn around when she answered, because I understand them, Commander. I understand what it feels like to be a predator who has never known fear, and I understand that the only way to defeat such predators is to show them what fear truly means. Will they come back? Now Maya did turn, and something that might have been a sad smile touched her lips. The Kaline, no. Not here, not anywhere they think I might be. They will tell this story too. They're warriors. They will add it to their legends about the Sarkith, the hunter that cannot be stopped, and every time they consider attacking a human colony, they will wonder if I might be. They're waiting in the darkness. She stepped into the airlock, then paused. Once more, that is the real weapon, Commander. Not violence, not ships or weapons or even skill. The real weapon is the memory of what I am capable of becoming. The Kaline will carry that memory forever, and that memory will save more lives than any battle ever could. The airlock sealed behind her, and Maya Rodriguez departed Haven Colony. She returned to Mars, to her quiet habitat carved in red rock, to the life she had built away from war. But she kept her armor maintained. She kept her ship fueled. She kept her weapons ready. Because somewhere in the galaxy there would always be predators who forgot the lessons of history, and when they did, when they threatened the innocent and the helpless, the hunter would wake. Again, the Kaline fleet jumped to hyperspace and did not stop until they were 15 systems away from Haven Colony. In the flagship's conference room, the commander gathered his officers for an emergency meeting. They needed to discuss what had happened, to analyze their failure, to determine how one human had defeated an entire fleet. without destroying a single ship, but as they talked and debated and tried to rationalize the impossible, they all felt it, that cold sensation that would not go away, that new emotion that they had never experienced before, fear of the hunter that walked on two legs, fear of the species that had promised not to fight but had never forgotten how, fear of humanity and the terrible things they became when pushed beyond the edge of civilization. The legend of Maya Rodriguez spread through the Kaline Empire like wildfire. Within weeks, every warrior knew the story of Haven Colony. Within months it had become part of their military training. Cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating an enemy, a reminder that strength alone was not enough, and in the quiet corridors of the Galactic Coalition, officials read the reports from Haven Colony with growing concern. The Fortress Accord had been broken. Human warrior had returned to combat. The thing they had all feared, the thing they had spent 30 years trying to prevent, had happened. But when they reviewed the battle recordings, when they saw what Maya had done and how she had done it, they made a decision. The Fortress Accord would remain in place. Humanity would continue to be restricted from active military deployment. But there would be an exception clause, buried deep in classified documents, known only to the highest-ranking officials in cases of extreme emergency, when civilian populations faced extinction, when all other options had failed. The galaxy could call upon the hunters, the humans who remember what it meant to fight without mercy, without hesitation, without the civilized restraints that kept societies peaceful. They would call them the last resort, the final weapon, the night that wakes when all hope is lost. Ana Rodriguez, the woman who wanted nothing more than to be left alone, who had spent 20 years trying to forget what she was capable of, became the first name on that list. She never knew about the classification. She never learned that her name had become synonymous with humanity's darkest potential. She simply returned to her quiet life and hoped that the call would never come again. But in the darkness between stars, in the places where predators gathered and violence was currency, a new word began to spread, not in Kaline but in a dozen languages across 100 worlds. Sarka, the hunter that cannot be stopped, the human warrior, the nightmare that walks on two legs, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other predators heard that word and remembered to be afraid.